having a look at what actually is mindfulness, because it tends to be one of those things that we talk about a lot, and I'm often not sure that we really understand what it is as a concept. Someone asked me the other day, isn't mindfulness the same thing as resilience? And it's very distinctly not, although it is important to resilience. Okay, so mindfulness can be described as the practice of paying attention in the present moment. So being very intentional and being there with no judgment. And the two key things that are really the descriptors, I guess, for mindfulness are that it is non-judgment and it's very intentional. So it's purposeful presence, we often refer to it as. Now, mindfulness meditation practices, which is what we often hear mindfulness described as, is about the deliberate act of regulating our attention through observation of our thoughts, but also our emotions and our body states. And so, you know, when we talk about what's the point of mindfulness, well, it can assist us to be more engaged in our lives and also in the workplace. So I think it's a really valuable tool to have to help us build better culture. So in and of itself, mindfulness is really just a tool for optimizing our own experience. And we're going to talk some more in a minute about why it's beneficial for culture. But I wanted to point out that much like resilience, which is the skill of synthesizing effort across those 4 key areas, physical, social, emotional, and cognitive, mindfulness is about managing the external circumstances and maintaining healthy boundaries from the potential stressors. So you can see that just as in the image here with all the stuff going on around the lady's head, all the stuff still occurs, but we are able to better manage our response. So we learn to respond rather than react to what's happening around us. And really that's what we want to be talking about this afternoon. We're exploring this concept of presence as a way of altering our interactions and circumstances rather than just, I guess, subconsciously reacting to events without awareness of our own response and reaction patterns. So we often talk about the state of flow. Many of you will be familiar with that concept. And flow is the mental state where we're so immersed in a feeling of energized focus that we become fully involved in it. So we start to really enjoy it. And any runner will talk to you about the runner's high. You know, a writer will talk to you about writing for hours on end. People who love their job will tell you that they don't feel like they're working during the day. So it's about that sense of enjoyment in the process of the activity, and that helps us to lose sight of space and time. And you might have had a moment in the past, maybe while you've been writing or designing or working through a complex problem yourself, where you're so focused on the task that the world around you starts to disappear. And it can feel like you're on autopilot and you just know you're in the zone, and work comes naturally in that space with no friction and very little effort. So it's that sense of what artists talk about, the muse, or athletes talk about being in the zone. But psychologists today have given it an official name, and that name is flow. And the concept of flow, by the way, was first coined by a psychologist back in the 70s. He was one of the first ever positive psychologists to start looking at this kind of stuff. And his name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I know how to pronounce his name because someone once asked me when I gave a keynote speech and I had no idea, and I thought I'll never be caught in that situation again. So I went away and looked up how to pronounce his name that evening. Okay, so that concept of mindfulness, what I really want us to focus on today is the paradigm we find ourselves in, because my gut feel is that part of the reason why so many people are interested in staying at home is because they've necessarily had the opportunity to press pause. So there's this, people feel like they've had better work-life balance, and I don't know, and I guess probably no one really knows yet how long you'll have the opportunity to work from home. But when we do have to return to the office, it would be awesome if we could figure out how do we bring that sense of calm and peace and experience of autonomy back into that other environment. And another descriptor that we often see here for mindfulness is that, and this is by Stephen Kotler, who's one of the sort of key change godfathers, it's where every action, every decision leads effortlessly, fluidlessly, and seamlessly to the next one. And it can be about high-speed problem solving. You're probably aware of those experiences you have where something takes the amount of time that you give it, so you can become more and more productive. And this is something that I'm hearing really commonly about people while they're working from home. I think one of the main reasons is because a lot of those filters are taken away. We don't have the concern for someone who bothers us and distracts us from our work, or whether someone is using a tone of voice that makes us feel appreciated or not. We don't know yet, of course, what that's going to mean for the long term. And there was a really interesting article in Saturday's Australian about the Deloitte report that's just come out around working from home and the measures of productivity. So quite interesting. Anyway, back to mindfulness. I know it sounds like a bit of a dream, this concept of high-speed problem solving and seamlessly moving from one thing to the next. But like any kind of dream state, as soon as you recognize that you're in flow, that blissful sensation begins to dissolve, and the world around us and all of those distractions start to come rushing back into our heads. And that's why it's so important to learn and practice mindfulness as a skill, so that you can use it. You know, you can use it instantly, and you can expand your results. And there are ways to achieve it. So it's not all just about, you know, some kind of woo-woo concept that's about being present. Presence is a learned state. It's not something we're naturally born with. But it does, mindfulness does have some profound impacts that occur through simple practices. So there are activities that take us there, like mindful breath work, or, you know, thinking mindfully, mindful walking, meditation, eating mindfully, the body scan style of trying to check in with your body, or practicing listening with non-judgment. And it can lead to some amazing benefits, you know, in terms of reduced stress and burnout, and therefore increased absenteeism. Also, we see, anecdotally, we see stories about, you know, more easily managed or self-directed teams, more collaborative conditions in the culture, better relationships, teams that are better prepared for challenge. So I think there are some real benefits to be gained from the organizational perspective. We talked about that, that concept of, you know, mindfulness leading to flow state. They're often spoken about interchangeably, but I just think it's interesting to think about if you're doing something that you're skilled at, so you feel competent and you know that you're competent. And often when we remove ourselves, so it may not necessarily be that people are at home that makes them feel more autonomous or competent, but a change in circumstance often creates an up level in competence. It's an interesting kind of psychological phenomenon, but it can go one of two ways. It's a bit of a pendulum. Sometimes when we feel like a fish out of water, all of our innate skills and strengths come to the fore, and we're able to operate more effectively, become more productive, more competent, feel more confident. And sometimes, of course, it goes the other way. It's interesting to think about, you know, when you're doing something well, and you know that you're good at that something, you are able to push yourself outside your comfort zone more. And you know, it's the concept here is that it's mastery combined with challenge that brings flow. So you have to enter flow state at that moment where your skill is being put to the test, but not so much that you become overwhelmed by the task at hand. And you know, that ultimately, the whole concept of flow here is that analogy that the founding forefather gives us, Mihaly, talking about imagining a skier skiing down a slope, and the full attention of that skier is focused on the movement of his or her body. So the position of the skis, the air whistling past their face, the snow-shrouded trees that they're passing. They're not thinking about conflict or contradiction. You know, that they know that those distracting thoughts or emotions are likely to get you buried face down in the snow. So it's so perfect that you want it to last forever, and there's that moment there where you're able to stay really present in the moment. Now, before we talk about some of the benefits and how to actually build mindfulness, I just wanted to touch on why it's so important to use the skill of mindfulness as a daily practice. And this is because of what I refer to as the past in the future pitfall. So when we are not able to be mindful, when we struggle to be mindful, what happens is our body is present, but our mind is wandering elsewhere, and we're often, you know, we lack productivity, of course, in that state. Focus is hard to find, and then when we're challenged to find focus, and we are less productive, we start to experience a depletion in our own sense of competency and purpose, I guess. And we talk about this as the past being in the future because those filters that we've talked about before start to kick in. So our stories about ourselves, and we'll touch on that in a moment, the brain-based model for managing your own experience. Those filters that we have for I'm not good enough, she doesn't like me, she doesn't think I'm a good manager, these sorts of stories kick in, and they're not only in our present, but they are now impacting our future. So we call that the past in the future syndrome. So a good one just to watch out for. So mindfulness really is about recognizing the difference between fullness and the fullness of space. And my experience, certainly for myself and with my coaching clients, is that often the emptier we get, the fuller we feel. So contrary to what we usually believe, some of the best moments in our lives are not just passive, receptive, relaxing times. Sometimes they are about when we're challenged, but we have the right mental focus and clarity to have space in our mind during that time. Okay, so let's just talk about, why mindfulness matters. And because some of these tools, even like resilience, when we saw a resurgence of organizations introducing resilience as core strengths for leadership teams a few years ago, and there was a bit of a early adopters innovation in that space, and then a lot of people were like, well, what's the actual benefit? And I can tell you that from organizations that we work with and we pulse check to measure, the outcomes are incredible. And resilience is one of them for sure, but so is mindfulness. Some of the benefits that mindfulness delivers, and you can think about these at the individual and the organization level. So with reduced stress, we have improved ability to manage our stress. So we learn the skills of stress management. Increased focus gives us improved ability to pay attention, focus, and concentrate. Improved emotional regulation, which is all about reducing our impulsiveness and improving behaviours, because behaviours result from our reactive responses. Increasing emotional intelligence improves our conflict resolution skills, and that's why we say that emotional intelligence is core for good culture and it's foundational to effective leadership skill. Increased empathy and respect, which help us understand each other better. That helps us to embrace diversity more effectively. Increased resilience helps us to increase our own capacity by managing ourselves across those 4 pillars, which again are the physical, the social, the emotional, and the cognitive, but also our own physical well-being, so physical activity, which is part of resilience as well. And then improved creativity and collaboration. And we often see improved expression when people are able to adapt the skill of mindfulness. And the great key about mindfulness is it helps us in the moment. So it's an in the moment kind of skill. It's not like something you have to go away and do. It has an instantaneous response. We're able to actually transform our experiences momentarily, moment by moment. And when we talk about what that means at the organizational level, I think mindfulness is a real art that can help us balance our thoughts and our associated emotions. And that in turn helps us to harness our ideas and work together more effectively in teams. And what better time to be reflecting on mindfulness than now, when there has been this kind of enforced pause for many of us. We've necessarily been reminded to slow down, to do what is required, to prioritize what matters most to us in the moment. We're dealing with the challenges, all that stuff like the interruption of kids, the internet dropping in and out while we're working from home, but it's not stressing us out in the same way, or that's certainly my observation anyway. And for those who've gone a little further, I'm hearing tales of balance, of redirection, of growth during challenge. And I'm not saying, of course, that this is the case for everyone during this time, or that you need to or should turn this experience into that for yourself. But what I'm saying is that while we can't always control circumstances, we absolutely can control our thoughts about them, and that our thoughts are the foundation of our experience. So when we're talking about mindfulness and culture, we just talked about the benefits of mindfulness. Self-reflection, presence, stillness, these are all good descriptors of mindfulness. And when we're still long enough and present in the now without distraction, we begin to actually outperform our filters. So I think that is what is going on with people really loving this time at home. Whether that remains the same once, whether that would remain the same over the long term, I don't know. We'd need to research that over time. But I believe that that is one of the reasons why people are enjoying working from home, or so many people are enjoying working from home. Mindfulness, you know, when we're mindful, that breeds insight, yeah? So when we get that sense of stillness, we start to self-reflect, and we naturally start that process of emotional intelligence kicks in. So we start to look at how am I learning and growing, and what's happening here for me. Right, so looking at the brain-based model, we know from the brain-based model that thought precedes emotion, and most of you will have heard me talk about this before, but I think it's useful to revisit. So the origins of our experience come not from the circumstance or the situation. And today I'm going to actually show you, I'm going to take you through an exercise to help you actually unpack that and uncollapse some of those things. But we often think that it is the situation that causes our emotion, right? When in fact we know that thought precedes emotion, but our general way subconsciously of operating is like, oh well, it's the circumstances or situation that are making me feel this way, and then that's why I'm behaving this way. But in fact, there's a whole piece in between experiencing emotion and taking action, which is around the concept of, you know, experiencing that emotion, formulating a belief. Now look, your brain is a meaning making machine. If we don't supervise what the brain does, it just does what it's always been doing. So we have to backstep and ask ourselves, you know, what are the beliefs that I'm making up about the way that I feel right now, and what's my identity that forms out of that? And that's what drives our action. So it's at the long line, at the end of a long line of things that is triggered by the situation or circumstance, but really effectively starts with this one here. It's about your thought. Your thought creates your emotion. It's often the subconscious thoughts as well, which are automated, that create our reality. They form a kind of a layer, I guess, which we filter all our experiences through, and we make up that meaning and assign meaning to it. And that's what the concept of neuroscience is all about. The good news in all of this is that we have complete control over this process, which I think is really exciting. We get to choose what we think, and therefore what we feel and what we experience. And I want to share with you the 3 key tools now that I teach people to help them understand how they can become more mindful through the skills of reframing and managing their thought processes. And I want you to try and do these with me as best you can. Okay, so aligning our thought and action and our emotion occurs through self-awareness and choice, which is followed by action. So the first tool that we use, many of you have probably seen this one before, is the lens exercise. And that's really just looking through 3 different lenses, or asking ourselves 3 different questions. How significant is this situation going to be when I look back in 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years? Is this the thing that's going to define me? You know, how much power am I giving this? So that's all about the concept of gaining perspective. The second question, what's going on for the other person or people who are involved here? So what's happening for other people? How are they feeling? What might they be experiencing? And that's about developing the other person perspective, because it's always important to bring empathy and to understand what's going on at a broader or deeper level. And then the third question, what is the opportunity for growth or development? You know, what skills do I need to call on from the past? What opportunity is there for me to develop new skills here? So this is a great, simple exercise you can run through whenever you have a specific circumstance that's challenging you, and when you're struggling to get past thinking it's about the circumstance. So, you know, we have that choice. What's that saying? I love it. Finding a way out of no way. I love that saying. So, you know, this is about figuring out, when you're looking at a circumstance or a situation that seems like a real insurmountable barrier to you, how can you actually find a way through that by creating perspective, or getting some perspective about the circumstance, deciding how big a deal it's going to be for you. You can't change what's happened, but you can determine how significant an impact it has on you. Secondly, by looking at what might be happening for the other person. That's the first question that any positive psychologist will ask you in a therapy session. What do you think might be some reasons that person behaved in that way? And thirdly, what are you going to have to do to come out of this all guns blazing? So to really thrive rather than just survive. What personal skills and development would you need to engage? Next tool I want to talk to you about is I want to talk to you about how you can hack your own way happy in 3 simple steps. So you are very powerful over your own emotional experiences. And once you can identify the thoughts that are creating your experiences, you can make a choice about those thoughts. So 3 simple steps, right? And I wanted to just put this up on the flip chart because sometimes we can overthink these kinds of exercises. So it's good to see what is the template you run yourself through to actually activate these exercises. Step number 1, feel your now. So that is about using the skill of mindfulness to ask yourself, what is the emotion that I'm experiencing right here and now? I want you to do this with me. Let's work through it together, because once you've done it once, it'll be really easy for you to apply the model at another time. It's a simple 3-step model. What feeling do you feel right now? Now, 2 things I want to say about that. It's one word. It's an emotion. It's not a long diatribe, it's not a circumstance, it's not a sentence, it's not a belief, it's one word, feeling. So just ask yourself right now, how are you feeling? When you think about it, just stop for a minute, take one deep breath and ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? What is the describing word for the way that I feel right now? So first thing we have to do, right, is we have to be able to gain mastery over our experience. We have to be able to identify our emotional experience, because it is not the circumstances that are causing your emotions, it's your thoughts. Okay, so once we can define it, and you know, if you had to also, I'd say this, if we had to put one describing word with that word, what would it be? So if you're feeling busy, what does that feel like in your body? I know for me that when I feel stressed, my immediate reaction is to feel tired. So I could easily say I feel stressed and tired, but tired is more of the emotional experience, right? So, or depleted, you know, and it's really good to actually explore your emotional vocabulary too. It builds great empathy and emotional skill to be able to explore the emotional vocabulary and understand, am I angry or am I resentful? Am I tired or am I depleted? Once we start to understand our emotions more effectively, we're better able to plan for them. 50% of our emotions are going to be negative. So it's likely that in any given day, we're going to have a couple of hundred negative experiences. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to show my face and do this work the way we would do it in a room together, right? Because it creates a different level of engagement and alertness. Okay, so we all understand that. Step number 1, feel your now. What is the word that describes, what is the word that explains your emotional experience, and how do you describe it? Step number 2 is, I have to keep turning around because it's reversed when I look in the camera. Step number 2, find the sentence that's causing it. So it is a thought that is preceding your experience that is creating it. What's the sentence in your brain right now that fuels that experience? Often for me, I was explaining about the tiredness. Often for me, when I feel tired, it'll be because there's more work to get done than I think I can get done, right? Really important. Number 1, important thing to understand about step number 2, it is not the circumstance. You know, COVID-19 does not make you feel busy. It is COVID-19 in and of itself does not have any power over your emotional experience. But the thought that you assign to the circumstance, that drives your emotion. So if you learn to understand the emotion and describe the emotion so that you can recognize it when you're in it, in the experience of it, then you have developed that skill of mindfulness that allows you to step out of the experience and observe it. Really important to develop that observer skill. And then it's about facts versus thoughts, right? The experience is, excuse me, is loving it, you know, I'm at home, I'm loving working here, I'm feeling what? What are you feeling? If you're loving working from home, that's giving you an emotional experience. What is that experience? It is loving it, but it's also something else, I'd say. Might be peaceful or relaxed or content. And then the next question, so the step 2 question is, what is the sentence that drives that emotion? Is it, I have so much more time, I feel freer, there are no interruptions? And the reason I'm asking you this is because this is the tool that you can use to maintain this experience of contentment if and when you come back into the office. And also just you can use this model anytime on anything else. So it's important to separate the facts from the thoughts, right? So working from home is a fact. Working from home is not a thought. Working from home is not an emotional experience. Working from home is the fact. So the more that you can do that work of practicing mindfulness, and look, this exercise is taking us, 10 minutes or so here and now, but you'll get good at it. I can do this in 30 seconds for myself, and it will be really effective, and it will have a permanent effect on the filter I'm working with, I think it becomes a real strength, particularly for leaders, for all of us, but especially for leaders, because we stop having that experience of being busy and being rushed and feeling pressured, and we're able to connect more effectively with people. And when we connect more effectively with people, they feel trusted, they feel, they get that sense of being loved and warmed, and they do a better job. So it's win-win, right? They see us as a great manager, we get great outcomes, they're having a great time, everyone's having a good time in that scenario. Okay, so step number 2, the important things to remember is that it is not about the circumstance. It is about separating your facts from your thoughts and identifying what is the sentence in your head. And for me, when I end up feeling tired, it is rarely, I never think of it now as being about the circumstance. I always just think of it as, okay, well, I know that I must be stressed about whether I'm going to get all of this done or not. So the next question is, how do we address that? Step number 3. And this is about creating a new and true thought. And this is one of the best hacks you'll ever come across for managing your own experience or altering your own experience. This is about creating a new thought, which is also true. And how does a thought become true? Because we decide it's the truth. Now, when I look at some of those beliefs that you guys were just typing in then, like, oh, I'm really busy, I'll never get this done, oh, I feel trusted, those sorts of beliefs, I am trusted is a belief. That sort of belief, I can really warm to. Oh, that must feel so freeing. No wonder you feel like it's easier to do your job, and the scenario is working out better because there's this increase in trust, which is so nice. We might try and measure some of that in our last pulse check, perhaps. But that creates a new feeling, right? That sense of being trusted. And then the new feeling has equal weight with the old feeling. So sometimes, and we often talk about, there's this concept of you can't outperform your subconscious. So if your subconscious is saying to you, I'll never get this done, the workload is far too high for everything I need to achieve this week or this month, then that's going to guide your experience, right? You're going to start having the emotions that fall out of a belief like that. And it becomes self-perpetuating the cycle. So then you'll say, oh, look, I was right. I didn't get everything done. The workload is too high. But the conversation is always about the wrong thing. Insofar as, maybe if you had reduced workload, you would be able to get it all done. But we can't always control the circumstances. So whenever we're pitching the circumstances being at the source of our issue, makes it very difficult for us to be in a position of power and move on. When we create a new feeling, like, and that's exactly what this person's done. So I'm working from home and I'm loving it. So we can create a new reality for ourselves, which starts to challenge the neural pathway that exists. Now, you can't just get rid of that neural pathway. It's not like just wanting something to be a different way is going to make it that way. So that's why we introduce a new thought. So for example, if I say to you, if I give you the thought that you'll never get all of this done, you're simply not productive enough to get all of this work done, it's not possible, you won't be able to achieve your goals this month. That's a pretty depressing feeling, right? The emotion that's going to fall out of that is like limitation, or you don't think I can do it, not good enough, inadequacy. If I give you the thought that you may not be able to get all of this done, but you might, you probably will, you probably get 50% of what's on the list done at least, you start to feel a bit freer. And when we feel freer, we are more open to innovation, to collaboration, to solutions that create outcomes. And this is just a very simple one, because we do talk about challenges that change us, and reframing is a really good tool when we've been through something significant or overwhelming or big that really has been, sometimes we're 3/4 of the way through those experiences before we actually recognize what we're learning from it. But it is really, it expedites our process, and we use this all the time when we're doing strategy work and change with organizations. It expedites the process of transition for people if they can start developing that insight early on. So I want to ask you guys, given this period of working remotely and all the changes, whether it's personal or professional, what is this experience showing you, teaching you, or telling you? We call it the show, teach, tell model. So what is this experience showing you, teaching you, or telling you about yourself? And sometimes that's, you know, part of the beauty of reframing, right? That we can, you know, moan and complain about people and the culture and the circumstances a lot, and then we go home to work and we find that, you know, that we don't enjoy it as much as we might have thought that we did. This happened for my own partner. He's been home now for like 5 or 6 weeks or something, and he works in the mining industry, so he's often away, and he sort of has had to create some projects for himself, because he's like, yeah, I need to have a purpose. I always really thought that I'd love being at home and having this time, but now I'm feeling a bit purposeless. And so he's wanted to take on more and more tasks around the school drop off and pick up and that sort of thing, which of course I'm not complaining about. It's part of the great gift of this time, I think, for organizations, is we had to act so quickly, and all of us, you know, leadership teams, organizations themselves, and individuals, we've all had to have really open minds. And in many ways, I'm seeing that this is really activating potential. So I'm really interested in, you know, how do we maintain this potential? Someone else is saying, it's showing me I can be easily distracted from work and teaching me to self-manage and telling me to be honest with myself about what I need to produce. Hey, that's fantastic. Yeah, I've been going back recently to the list of 5. So the 3 to 5 top things that I'll feel good about if I can get done today, and I, you know roughly in my head how much time they're going to take, maybe 1 hour each. You know, some of them an hour and a half, so I know I can get the admin done in and around that. But really important, and there's a couple of things in what you've said there. Like, one is illumination on the fact that you can be easily distracted, and probably that was happening in the office environment as well. Number 2, but you know, in ways that you might have thought were more appropriate for some reason. So number 1 is that illumination on noticing, you know, self-awareness. I can get distracted. Number 2, it's teaching me to self-manage, which is fantastic. And number 3, teaching you to be honest or more honest with yourself about what you want to produce.